This video is on this article, 7-Year Tribulation on Jesus' Savior site by Lawrence Jones, pastor, Central Baptist Church, Little Rock, Arkansas. And a couple of, on this site, there's some true information, but a couple of issues with it is, one, he teaches eternal security, which is a lie. In Romans 11 it says, if we I have plenty of scriptures to prove that eternal security is false doctrine, but Romans 11, for if we continue not in his goodness, then you too shall also be cut off. If you continue not in his goodness, you too shall also be cut off. So that's an if-then statement, meaning if you don't continue in the faith, then you could be cut off. And people, they just ignore scriptures because it doesn't fit what they want to hear, what they want to believe. It's not about what the truth is. So this is a similar case with this 7-year tribulation doctrine, which comes from the dispensationalism cult. And so the most important thing to recognize is, and also I noticed that people have they don't really listen, and so they're always thinking about something else, or they won't focus on. So it's just so it's hard to get a message across. And this is what people won't listen to, which is that this issue is not really about whether there's a 7-year tribulation or a pre-trib rapture. The real issue is that the people who are preaching dispensationalism preach two different, it's a cult, it's not the same religion. They preach two different programs or gospels. And in dispensational theology, Jesus Christ didn't come to die for the sins of the world so those who had faith in Jesus would be saved, but Jesus came to offer a physical kingdom on the earth to Israel. So in dispensationalism, they believe in two programs, that there's two gospels, a program for Israel on the earth, where they have earthly blessings, and God's plan was for Israel to rule over the earth by race, and a plan B, which is the church. And so this is the real issue, is that they believe in two different gospels. And the issue isn't really about a 7-year tribulation at all, or a pre-trib rapture. The real issue is that they believe in two different gospels. And so according to dispensational theology, this period they call it the church age. And the church age, according to them, ends. And so they say you're saved by grace in this period. But then it ends in a made-up rapture, and then for 7 years, this program starts over, and the church program is no longer existent. So that's the real deception. But people don't want to talk about that, or I found that for years. Like no one will recognize this fact. What people want to do is pretend that they're all in the same religion, and that they're having a discussion over the timing of the rapture, where it falls. And back to the article. Soon the world will enter the period of time described in Daniel as a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. So he's already misapplying scriptures. So this verse in Daniel isn't necessarily it's not talking about a 7-year period, so that's just a lie. A time when humanity will find itself under the rule of a one-world government with a wicked tyrant at its helm. Yes, the book of Daniel does speak of these things, but he's just being very general about it, generalizing. These explosive events will happen in a period commonly called the 7-year tribulation, which occurs before the 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ on the earth. This 7-year period was all made up by the dispensationalists, so that they can say that a new gospel starts for 7 years, because this is where the Christian Zionism comes in, because they believe that God has a separate program for ethnic Israel on the earth, and so God has that there's a different program for the church and a different program for the nation of Israel. And so they say during the made-up 7-year period that the Jews go back to rebuilding the temple, which is whether it will happen or not is not what I'm getting at. But they say that the Antichrist defiles the temple, since God in this dispensational theology, God is happy with the new temple, and God gets upset that the Antichrist defiles the temple and ends the sacrifices, because in dispensationalism the Old Testament starts over and God goes back to Old Testament sacrifices. See, it's just silly. And nowhere in the Bible does it say a 7-year tribulation, and so they just make it up and people just repeat it. Those who believe this truth are commonly called dispensational premillennialists. Premillennialists believe there will be a 1,000-year period before which Christ will physically return to the earth. Well, that's what the Bible teaches. It says there will be a millennium, so it has nothing to do with dispensationalism. But usually Calvinists will reject the millennium. The term dispensational is used to denote premillennialists who believe the Bible teaches there will be a 7-year tribulation. Well, that's a lie. What dispensationalism they believe, the real core issue of what they believe is that they believe in 2 different gospels. It's not that they believe in a 7-year period. That's what I said from the beginning before I even read the article. So dispensationalists are liars. They are also classified as futurists. Well, that's stupid. There's no reason to classify anything as a futurist or anything like that, because there are prophecies that have to be fulfilled in the future. So to say, well, you're a futurist, that makes no sense. That's just something else that Calvinists made up to make fun of people that believe in future prophecies. They call them futurists. He's saying there's 2 major positions. I don't really approach things like that. It doesn't matter. There's only one position. There's the right way, and that's it. Amillennialism and postmillennialism. Yeah, so the Calvinists deny there's a millennium, and they also deny that salvation is by faith. That, it's a cult. And so see how it's making it seem as if, oh, they're all Christians, they just disagree on the timing of the second coming. See, this person who's writing the article is getting all caught up in the labels. Millennialists, Baptists, this and that. And none of these terms are really even in the Bible. See, he's already admitting he's a dispensationalist. The 7-year tribulation stands at one of the most important strategic positions in dispensational prophecy. Well, the reason why it's important is because for them, that's what delineates their 2 different programs. So for program B for them ends in the made-up rapture, and then program A for them starts over for 7 years, which was a program for Israel. And that's the whole deception right there. I've explained it before. It's just, I don't think people want to hear it, and I figured it out. And it comes from the twisting of Daniel 9:27, when it says, "And he shall confirm a covenant with many," is talking about Jesus Christ. Dispensationalists twist the verse to say that it's talking about the Antichrist. And the NIV also twists the words to make people think it's talking about the Antichrist in a future 7-year period and all this and that. It says Jesus Christ will confirm the new covenant with many. That means all. Like, in the midst of the week. So in the middle of Jesus' ministry, which was during the 70th week, Jesus confirmed the covenant, through his sacrifice at the cross. And then he says he's been on this long road and all this and that. That's another sign of a false preacher, is they always start talking about, oh, I used to go to this church and they taught us this false doctrine, and then I learned that it was really pre-trib. And then he's making a correlation between the Calvinist idea of amillennialism and dispensational lies. So he's putting two lies in, a false dichotomy. So this is what these liars do, is they say that, oh, Israel has a place in God's plan. So, they just kind of make this general statement, but what they really mean is that God has a separate program and a separate gospel for Israel. That's what their chart shows you. But they're not going to come out and say that. They just say, oh, well, if you don't believe that God has, if you don't deny the new covenant, then you're an anti-Semite. That's their real devilish end game. See, what they're doing is denying the new covenant, because they're saying that there's two gospels. The Bible says if anyone preaches another gospel, let them be accursed. So these people, what they do is they try to say, oh, well, God still has a plan for the Jews. Well, you're an anti-Semite, So they just try to scare you with the anti-Semite word, so you'll lose your salvation. Is pretty much the bottom line. I've heard the historical arguments. It's not a historical argument. It's just history, declaring that dispensationalism is nothing more than a heresy. Well, that's the truth. And this is what these false teachers always do, is they say, well, I was a Christian all this time, and then I struggled through these false teachers, and I read all these books and got this false information that I came to realize, and then they give you a lie. And then he gives you another false dichotomy, is the futurist and the historicist. No, it's the fact that it's just the Bible. There is no future 70th week. It happened right after the 69th. The future 70th week lie is a dispensational cult doctrine. None of this is true of what he's saying. He's just using a bunch of labels. That's true what he said. It is important to understand why the 7-year tribulation doesn't exist, and that is where it comes from. See what he says? He says a proper view of the 7-year tribulation begins with Israel. See, that's what it's really about, is they want you to worship the state of Israel. That's what he's really saying. It's not about the Bible or prophecy. That's what the whole deception is about. He's saying if God is done with Israel, so now he's saying that's their little trick. They say God's not done with Israel, but what they really mean is that God has a different gospel for Israel. But they don't say that. If they just say God's not done with Israel, then people will say like, oh, of course not. Yeah, no. But that's not what they mean. the truth is God is not done with. God is not willing that any man should, should perish, but that all should come to repentance. So God gives all Israelites by race the chance to be saved by faith in the gospel, and that's the only way. There is no separate program. What these people are trying to say is that there's a separate program, and it's a heresy.